We're very lucky today to be joined once again on the program by a candidate running in the Democratic primary for Texas's 28th district, Jessica Cisneros. Welcome back to the Damage Report.
Thank you so much for having me.
Very glad to have you on. We were just speaking before the show. The last time you were on was in the middle of 2019. A lot has changed since then in the world. I think most of it goes without saying. But since then, you have run for Congress and now are launching your second congressional run, which is very exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about the decision to run again, some of the lessons perhaps that you've learned? Tell us about this race.
Absolutely. I mean, the decision to run was kind of already made ever since last time around, just because we knew going in how difficult it would be to defeat a 15-year incumbent, right? Someone like Henry Cuellar, who has a deep war chest and is basically powered by all of the bad guys you can think of, whether it be the Koch network, Exxon, the private prison industry, NRA, all those bad guys, they have an interest in keeping him there. And obviously we're running a progressive grassroots campaign, not taking a single dime of corporate PAC money. I myself don't come from wealth. I don't have a political background. Last time was my first time running. And we knew that this might be a commitment that might last longer than just, one election cycle. Mm-hmm. But as we've seen with other progressives, like for example, Cori Bush, right? Yeah, it was a 4-year project, but it's definitely worth it to be able to bring representation to folks. So the decision was made, especially, seeing the devastating impacts of the COVID pandemic and how there were so many crises already, going on, and then this pandemic just basically exacerbated everything, right? Whether it be a lack of healthcare, folks not having health insurance, people already having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet, and then get laid off. Whatever little benefits that they had are gone. It was just like a reminder of how high stakes everything was, and folks asked me to run again. So it was like, we have to honor everything that, the team and everyone who came behind this campaign to, we owe ourselves a second shot, especially of how close we came. We earned 48.2% of the vote in our first race. So we're excited to finish it off.
Yeah, I'm looking at the results right now. Less than 3,000 votes separating you from Henry Cuellar, which if someone in the audience is watching this, you haven't been following American politics for a very long time, if you're an international viewer, for a first time primary challenge to like a long standing incumbent, that is an incredible showing. Like you, I think rightfully laid out sort of the model that a candidate like you would follow, which is Cori Bush, who did well, and then ran again and succeeded. But you were so close. And so tell me a little bit about what's changed since then. So you've now got that experience, and you certainly have more name recognition in the district. A lot has changed, nationally. A lot has changed about the country. But how do you put yourself over the top this time around?
I think it's just continuing what we were doing last time around. Obviously, parts of the district are new. There are parts of the district that we lost because of redistricting that's happening around the country because of the census. But we saw that what we were doing was successful, right? That we can run an unabashedly progressive campaign in the middle of South Texas and be able to garner enough support to be competitive. I mean, that's one of our greatest accomplishments, I guess, from last time around, because folks kept saying like, yeah, it sounds great, I support you, but will others, right? But now we can point to, yeah, others do. Like we literally started off with, 0 campaign funds, and we had to nickel and dime our way to be able to fund this race. And thanks to all the supportive folks, including viewers on here, right, that supported our race and gave what they can, and they volunteered what they could. And we took it from there. And voters, were really excited to hear about our bold policies that meet the moment that we are currently in right now, especially after the pandemic. So being a candidate is such a huge learning curve. Obviously, my team and I did what we could to try to overcome it as quickly as possible. And I think, we did. But this time around, we feel much more confident because we knew exactly what we were doing from day one. And I'm like very grateful to have the support of, the folks that believed in us last time, and then continue to garner support throughout the district. And it's been pretty great to see the response that we've had so far.
And I think you might have tweeted earlier today about Move On, I think. I mean, I know you have some of the same big endorsements that you had the last time around, but can you tell us a little bit about the institutional support?
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten so many amazing organizations behind our campaign. Obviously, Justice Democrats, they are behind our campaign since day one, just like they did last time. But we've also, I mean, pride ourselves in having a pretty big coalition because FOIAD is just so bad on so many issues. You can take your pick: choice, labor, gun violence prevention. Like you pick, and he's usually on the wrong side. So we have in addition to progressive powerhouses, we also have the endorsements of folks like Emily's List, like Planned Parenthood, Daily Kos, Move On got into the race. NARAL is behind our campaign as well. So there's so many awesome organizations out there putting in excellent work on issue-based stuff that are supporting our campaign. And then we obviously have like our awesome lefty orgs like Democracy for America, Progressive Change Campaign Committee. We have now we have Move On. So it's been great to also count on the support of Working Families Party as well. So we are going to continue growing our coalition, and it's one to definitely watch out for.
Awesome. Now that we've gotten all of the important endorsements out of the way, if it's not clear for the audience, I also endorse you in your bid against Henry Cuellar. So let's just get that out of the way. But so you mentioned there that he's awful, and he certainly is. What I'm curious about is, in the past, even the threat of a strong primary challenger has in some cases made politicians change a little bit. Like Chuck Schumer has never been more seemingly progressive than ever since AOC's been stomping around in his area. So what I'm curious is, has there been any indication that Henry Cuellar is taking the threat of a second run from you seriously and trying to at least appear more reasonable or representative in the district? Has he changed in any way?
I think he's been a little bit more active in the district. Definitely realized how much taking for granted an entire electorate, can be to your chances of getting reelected to represent those same people. But in terms of political stances, unfortunately, he's doubled down on so many of them. Like he was the only, in response to Senate Bill 8 from the Texas legislature, as viewers might recall, this is the 6-week abortion ban, right? That basically incentivizes bounty hunters to turn in folks who are seeking abortion care. The Congress decided to vote on the Women's Health Protection Act, which was great. But then Henry Cuellar was the only Democrat to vote against it, right? He sided with Republicans on this key legislation to protect this human right, and obviously didn't do him any favors, right? He also likes to talk a lot about how he's a bipartisan member of Congress, but when it came to the PRO Act, which is a key piece of legislation for labor unions and laborers, he was the only Democrat to vote twice against it. Like this was his time to shine, right? Like you talk about being bipartisan, like you can be bipartisan on behalf of working class folks, but he decided not to. So these are just a couple of examples of how he's really doubled down on just trying to basically defect from a lot of the issues that we as Democrats or progressives see as important. And I think most recently we saw that with what was happening with the Build Back Better bill and the infrastructure bill as well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. Obviously having Henry Cuellar in office while that debate is going on all throughout last year, as opposed to you, that's a pretty big difference. If you were in office right now, what effect would you hope that you would be having in terms of that debate and some of the other related debates, issues that progressives have with Joe Biden about lack of action on like canceling student loan debt, for instance, those sorts of things?
I mean, I absolutely would have been a strong voice to not let the Chamber of Commerce, not let no labels and like other corporations basically have an influence on, untethering those two pieces of legislation, which is the Build Back Better and the infrastructure bill. We would have avoided this, and we probably could have passed two pieces of legislation that would have benefited our entire country, right? But unfortunately, right now we're still at a standstill. And I mean, the budget should have been passed months ago. And unfortunately, now there's people here that haven't seen an expansion in healthcare. They haven't seen, being able to afford childcare, being able to get paid family leave, so many things that would have directly impacted people in such a positive way. Now the likelihood of that passing, it's up to Manchin and Sinema, right? And that's not a good position to be when you're talking about bargaining on behalf of the American people. In terms of, trying to continue pushing the administration to take more progressive stances, I mean, I'm all for it. Especially as an attorney, like I understand, especially under the authority that the executive has, because I'm an immigration attorney, and a lot of the work that I do as a practitioner falls under the executive branch. So I know how much discretion the executive has, and anything I can do, whether you're talking about, trying to find executive fixes to our current immigration laws or canceling student loans, I'm definitely going to be a strong advocate for that.
I want to ask you one more policy-related question, because I know, as a Justice Democrat, in terms of campaign finance, you don't take money from corporations, those sorts of things. There's been an increased focus, thanks to Representative Ocasio-Cortez brings it up a lot, but now Nancy Pelosi commented on it, and Kevin McCarthy's talking about it, about individual stock ownership and trading of Congresspeople, like owning and potentially benefiting from secret information that they have access to benefit themselves financially. There have been attempts to try to outlaw that practice. What do you think about those sorts of efforts?
I mean, I definitely agree. And if you were to talk to anybody who might not be as plugged in to politics the way you and I are, and the viewers here are, I mean, it makes complete sense that people shouldn't be benefiting off of secret information, or that their votes, right? Their vote, they get to vote on legislation that would later benefit, their stocks. Like that just seems ridiculous. And it's actually a conversation that I've had with some folks who aren't as plugged in as I am, but live here in Laredo, and they're like, wow, that's so messed up that people can do that. And I mean, the example that I often use is Senator Manchin and him being a coal baron, right?
I use that example as well quite often. It seems absolutely insane, but I'm sure it didn't influence his, influence on the infrastructure conversations we've had and climate change legislation. So the election is less than 50 days away. Early voting is less than 34 days, I believe.
That's
if someone's
right.
watching this and they'd like to get involved, what would you like them to do?
I mean, a quick way to get involved remotely, obviously, is chipping in what you can. We're trying to make do, obviously, knowing that Cuellar has $2 million in the bank to start off with, and he's been actually fundraising from his obstruction of legislation that would invest in America's working class, as we've seen in the past few months. Again, talking about Build Back Better and the bipartisan infrastructure package. But also volunteers. If you can help us, especially right now, calling folks, if you're bilingual and want to volunteer to our campaign, please do so, because we need all hands on deck. This is basically one of the first tests, right, of how progressives are going to do in this midterms. So we need to show that we're coming with force, that we can win, especially in a state like Texas, which is historically, I mean, in the past a couple of decades, Republican. But that, the progressive platform is popular anywhere you go. And that's what we're trying to demonstrate here. So we need everyone's help to be able to make sure that we come up on top in this primary, which is happening on March 1st.
Awesome. Jessica Cisneros, as I said, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it, and good luck in your run.
Thank you so much.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.